Hello everyone, today we're going to take a look at the basics of the skeletal system, and you're going to do so with me, Sanika. So first let's take a look at the microscopic anatomy of the bone. So a lot of people think that bones are somewhat dead and dormant and there's not really much going on inside of them, but actually they are a very intricate system. And here's kind of what that looks like. Here's kind of what the microscopic anatomy of the bone looks like overall. And many people might also be surprised to find out that there are cells inside of the bone, osteocytes for example, and we'll get into that more right now. So firstly we have lacunae, which are cavities inside within the bone, and they contain the osteocytes. And osteocytes are important for bone remodeling and growth, and it's important because bones are, constantly breaking down, there's injuries that occur, and obviously growth occurring. And then we have lamellae, which are concentric rings of these lacunae cavities. And then we have the central or the Haversian canal, and this canal carries blood to the vessels and nerves within the bone. And then we also have the osteon or Haversian system. It's often described as a unit of bone with the central canal and matrix rings. The matrix rings are around the central canal. Now here's kind of what that osteon unit looks like, and here's that central canal in the middle right there. And then there's also the canaliculi, and these are tiny canals that stretch out from the lacunae cavities, and they're important for nourishment of the bone, and they really distribute those nutrients around the bone. As you can see, a single canaliculus is shown right here, and here's the lacuna from which it stretches out from. And then we also have the perforating or Volkmann's canal, and it carries blood vessels and nerves on the bone. Here is the Volkmann's canal right here. So first let's take a look at the first division of the skeletal system. It's kind of everything that's in the middle. It excludes the appendages and the limbs. That's the axial skeleton that's highlighted in green. And its first component is the skull. And the skull is made up of 8 cranial bones. They serve to protect the brain. That's these right here. And then we have the facial bones. There's 14 of them. And they do things such as hold the eyes in place. And they also serve as anchors for facial muscles. And this is how we can move our face in response to certain things in our life and display emotions. Next, we have the vertebral column, and there's 3 types of vertebrae in the vertebral column. So we have 7 of the cervical vertebrae here in brown, and then we have 12 thoracic vertebrae. There's like kind of yellow-brown in the middle, and then we have 5 lumbar vertebrae, pinkish right here. And then we have the sacrum, which is this purple, and then we have the coccyx, otherwise described as the tailbone, right here at the bottom. And each vertebrae or vertebra kind of has its own anatomy depending on its function. So this would be a thoracic vertebrae because it has a facet for a rib, and that's because the thoracic vertebrae articulate with the ribs. And each vertebra is made slightly differently. So a cervical vertebrae would look different and a lumbar vertebrae would look different as well. So that's the basics of the vertebral column. Next we have the bony thorax. It's kind of everything in this middle rib cage here. So we have the sternum, which is this bone in the middle, and it kind of has 3 main divisions. So the manubrium is this heart-shaped portion of the sternum right here. This middle part is the body of the sternum, and then this middle part, this very bottom part, this tiny point, is known as the xiphoid process. And then we have thoracic vertebrae in the back. They connect to the ribs. And then we have the ribs, the main part of the rib cage, and they're kind of labeled differently according to how they attach to the sternum. So true ribs, pairs 1 through 7, they directly attach to the sternum in the middle. And then we have false ribs. They either don't attach to the sternum at all, or they indirectly attach to the sternum through costal cartilage. And then the last 2 pairs, which are part of the false ribs, and as I said, they don't attach at all. And then the rest of the false ribs, they actually attach indirectly through costal cartilage. And that's the basic of the bony thorax. So next, let's look at the basics of the appendicular skeleton. That's the appendages and the limbs and how they attach kind of to the middle with like the shoulder and the pelvis. So first, let's take a look at the pectoral or shoulder girdle. So we have the clavicle. It's otherwise known as the collarbone, and it can sometimes be seen. And it articulates with the acromion of the scapula, which is in the back of the scapula right here. This is the scapula. And the coracoid process here in the front is how the spine attaches. And then we have the humerus and how it attaches to the scapula at the glenoid fossa. That's kind of like a depression in the scapula, and the head of the humerus here can attach into that depression. So the superior limb, otherwise known as your arm, is made up of firstly of the humerus, which is your upper arm, this long bone, and then your forearm is made up of your radius, which is on the thumb side, right here, and then your ulna, which is on the pinky side. This is what makes your forearm. And then we have the hand, 3 types of bones. So we have the carpals right here, the metacarpals in the middle, and your phalanges are your fingers. Next, we have the pelvic girdle. So the pelvis is made up of 2 os coxae, 2 hip bones. This is 1, this is 2. And then we have the sacrum right here, and then the coccyx that would be at the very bottom. So that's kind of 4 main bones. And we have the ilium that's kind of on the top or the side. This would be the ilium here. And then we have the pubis. And the 2 pubic bones, they join at the pubic symphysis, which is a joint made up of hyaline and fibrous cartilage. And then we have the ischium right here in the back. And then we have the inferior limb. And this is otherwise known as your leg. So the femur, or your thigh bone, articulates with the pelvis at the acetabulum. You can't exactly see it, but it would be somewhere here. And then the condyles, which are like tiny, kind of like bumps at the bottom of the femur, this is how it attaches to the tibia, and it articulates with the tibia, which is your big shin bone. And then there's also your fibula in the back, which makes the bottom part of your inferior limb. And then both the tibia and fibula have bumps kind of at the bottom, and they attach to your foot, and they're called malleoli, and that's what makes your ankle. And then your foot is made up of 3 main bones as well, similar to your hand. So we have the tarsals, the metatarsals in the middle, and then we have phalanges, which are your toes. So let's also take a look at basics of articulations and joints. So joints are responsible for movement and also for the connection of bones in the skeletal system. So they can firstly be classified by how movable they are. So a joint can be a synarthrosis, meaning it is immovable. An example of this would be fibrous sutures that connect the skull bones. So obviously skull bones have to be connected in order to make the singular skull, but we can't move the skull bones, which would be very dangerous if we could. And then we have another type of joint known as an antiarthrosis. This means it is slightly movable, and this would be the pubic symphysis in the pelvis, as described previously in the pelvic girdle slide of the appendicular skeleton, and it's made from hyaline and fibrous cartilage. And then lastly, we have a diarthrosis, which is a very movable or free joint. It's usually what you would think when you think of joints, and an example of this would be the elbow joint. Next, we can also classify articulations by their structure or what they're made up of. So firstly, we have fibrous joints, immovable, and they're made up of collagen fibers. An example of this would be the interosseous membrane between the tibia and the fibula. And I don't think that we had a picture of this, the interosseous membrane between the tibia and the fibula, in the inferior limb slide of our appendicular skeleton explanation, but the tibia and fibula are actually joined by this fibrous joint, and that's called the interosseous membrane. And then we also have cartilaginous joints made up of cartilage. They're slightly movable, and they're mostly for structure. And then an example of this would be the intervertebral symphysis. which is a cartilaginous joint that connects individual vertebrae together. And lastly, we have synovial joints. They're freely movable but also easily injured, and they have synovial fluid and joint cavity. An example of this would be the shoulder joint. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe to YouShare Science, and we are looking forward to bringing you new videos as soon as possible. Thank you so much.